Lecompton. The name was splashed across newspapers throughout America and Europe. It was debated in the halls of Congress. Lecompton interprets its unique territorial history with 2 museums and other sites. Events throughout the year celebrate history and community.
Make plans to attend the 20th Annual Bleeding Kansas Lecture Series at Constitution Hall each Sunday at 2 p.m. from January 31st to March 6th. Donations welcomed.
Spend the day in historic Lecompton, shopping, eating, savoring the rich history.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine. Your stem cells, your health, your life.
And we're back. Hey, you know, there's a novelty song that came out back in the 50s, early 60s called "Please, Mr. Custer, I Don't Want to Go."
I love that song.
I know, and I'm only doing that because I know you're going to do a story about Custer.
Yeah, you just can't avoid him. You know, Western history, Kansas, you can't avoid him.
Now, you also said that you had about 1,000 school children that you talked to, but one of them especially stood out because he asked a question.
This was so funny, and I'm reminded of it because in this next segment that we're going to do, Libby Custer talks about how there are no walls at Fort Riley, and she's surprised when they get there. It's not like a real fort. Well, most of the Western forts did not have walls for obvious reasons. There's not enough wood, so you can't put up a palisade. So when Jane and I were showing students the images, it's like an aerial representation of Fort Wallace. I asked the school kids, "Do you see walls?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, why not?" And, you know, some of them would say, because it's easier to get in and out, and, you know, and see, you know, all this stuff, you could escape, you know, and all, it was hilarious. But the one true Kansas boy, because they didn't build any, and that just
there you go,
cracked me up, because I started a file years ago on what I called Kansas logic, and I came to realize it's frontier logic. These guys, for example, I think this was my first one. After Lincoln was assassinated, this group of Kansans wrote to President Johnson and said, "We want Jeff Davis hung because we want him hung." You know, that's why we want him hung, because we want him hung. And it cracked me up, and they had a committee, and this is the letter they came up with.
We want him hung because we want him hung.
And it's that simple, and it's straightforward. We don't need to discuss it anymore. And that little boy, I'm like, a long line of pioneers right there, because they didn't build any.
Well,
That's
you know,
why there are no walls.
You know, Art Linkletter's, you know, children say the darndest things.
Yeah. Oh, they were awesome. They were awesome.
Please, Mr. Custer, I don't want
Please,
to go.
Mr. Custer. Please, TJ, give us another book on Custer. Let's take a look at it.
In October 1866, George and Libby Custer arrived at Fort Riley, Kansas. "This is not a fort, though called so," Libby wrote to a friend, "for there are no walls enclosing it." Rather, Libby described it as a little city of limestone buildings. The forts of the American West were indeed different from those traditional forts of the East in that there were no walls. There simply was not enough wood to build them in most Western landscapes. Instead, army posts depended on commanding a view of the countryside. Several Kansas forts, including Fort Riley, are discussed in the latest release from Pulitzer Prize-winning author T.J. Stiles. The book, Custer's Trials, A Life on the Frontier of a New America, will satisfy the nitpickiest of Custer fanatics as well as those of us fascinated with the 19th century American West. Stiles' rich descriptions of the landscapes and personalities of this era of Kansas make you want to step through the looking glass and straight into that colorful time. Custer was not born in Kansas, nor did he die here, but he is indelibly pressed upon the landscape. Though countless books have been written about him, this is a welcome volume. Western historian Robert Utley said of Stiles, "He portrays a real Custer, full of flaws but possessed of outstanding combat skills and leadership. This biography easily overshadows its many predecessors, offering new facts and interpretations as well as a wonderful read." I concur. And for the Kansan, many of our iconic Army posts are brought to life in a new and exciting way. This really is a must-read.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. A high-energy, drought-tolerant crop, sorghum only requires 6 inches of water to produce the first bushel. And with its wide uses and easy adaptation, sorghum proves to be a truly indispensable crop. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.